Hope everyone got a break, and other people who are still breaking will come back in soon. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Raissa de Rande from University of Chicago. She is going to be giving us a talk, Feeling Like a Philosopher King. Seems like it would be a nice thing. I'm not a Stoic. Feeling Like a Philosopher King, Emotions and Ideal Rulers in al-Farabi.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. Oh, great. All right, I hope everybody can hear me okay. Great. Good morning, everyone, or morning for us on Central. Before I get started, I wanted to thank the organizers of this formidable workshop for inviting me, and for all of you for thinking through this piece with me today. A quick organizational note, I have a small handout that pulls out some of the main passages that I quote, just sort of for you. Mental relaxation. And I also wanted to say something larger about this piece that I'm presenting today. I'm at this point, odd point of the junior faculty's career of having finished my first project and turning to my next book with all the kind of promise and anxiety that comes with that. So this next book is meant to be on al-Farabi's political, ethical, and religious thought, and is tentatively entitled No Salvation for the Faithful. This chapter is a first stab at his view of ethics, particularly his virtue theory. There is a great interest among, I think, virtue theorists, but especially among Islamic studies scholars, in virtue talk. But much of it focuses on very particular figures, particularly well-known theologians who kind of get pulled out of the hat for literally anything. That's usually al-Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah. So I'm hoping to show some of the ways in which a classical philosopher like al-Farabi approaches virtue talk and how it connects to his views of social organization and the relationship between philosophy and religion. And interestingly, emotion is sort of mixed into it. That being said, this is really new material for me, and I'm just very grateful I get to present it and engage with you on it. Okay, wonderful. So in a very recent book on the politics of asceticism, Alda Balthrop Lewis has noted, I'm quoting here, there's been a developing interest over the last few decades among both humanists and social scientists of the extent to which effective moral emotions, anger, guilt, admiration, sympathy, are integral to human rationality and motivate human behavior. The idea is that emotions are integral to rationality in that they enable knowledge. End of quote. Anger specifically here is often pulled out as a way in which we can tell that an injustice has occurred, which nicely segues with our first talk, I think, this morning. Perfect. Oh, is it? Yep, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so anger is often a way in which we can tell that an injustice has occurred. This recent interest in the role of affective emotion intersects with ancient interests in the connection between philosophy and psychology, or the ways in which proper emotion organization is foundational for and part of human intellectual and moral perfection. Additionally, as Zeynep Yelsa has noted, there's been an increasing turn towards the larger social and political implications of previously more personally construed emotions, such as anger. She writes, an essentialist analysis of emotions has increasingly given way to interpretations of emotions as social construct. The essentialist approach tended to see emotion as internal, irrational, natural, and universal physiological and psychological processes. Social constructivist approaches, on the other hand, evaluate emotions in relation to cultural norms. As such, anger appears as one of the fundamental emotions shaped by the social and cultural systems of a given society. End of quote. So this focus on the social function of emotions circumvents a lot of issues or potential issues in the history of emotions at the individual level, such as a lack of personal accounts, let alone any possibility of empirical study on physiological markers, like changes in endocrine levels and the central nervous system. So instead, emotions are increasingly understood, as Yeltsin notes, as cultural products that owe their meaning and coherence to learned social rules. This is meant to be more of a broad intro. Now, considering all of that, the study of emotions in Islam in particular, whether in its moral or social dimensions, is an emerging topic. Paul Hack has noted in a recent study that beyond individual expressions of feelings or bonds that tie the community together, emotions also exist for a life of virtue as informed by one's devotion to God. As a result, he notes, when it comes to Islam, the question of the ethical purpose cannot be ignored, even if such purpose is not always obvious. Taking into account these recent interests and developments in the larger study of emotions and particularly in the study of Islamic ethics and emotions, this paper then here today examines the relationship between properly ordered emotions and ideal rulers in one classical Islamic philosopher, namely al-Farabi, and more on him in a second. As we'll see, foundational to al-Farabi's account of proper human development is the idea of virtue as a mean between excess and deficiency. This conception of virtue as an ideal equilibrium, both of intellectual and moral habits, is mirrored in his account of the healthy soul, the healthy body, and importantly, the healthy city. All of these, virtue itself, the virtuous soul, the virtuous body, and the perfect city, are marked by balance. As a result, the ideal ruler is the one who is himself fully virtuous, that is intellectually and morally balanced, and able to bring about such balance in the souls of the inhabitants and the city as a whole. Overall, this paper demonstrates that al-Farabi's conception of ideal rulers as being fully balanced and measured, in control of well-balanced emotions and desired, is built on a conception of affections as animalistic and dangerous if unbridled. Having implications for overly free political arrangements, his account of slavery, and his estimation of women and children as unsuitable to political life, al-Farabi's vision of the importance of an emotional equilibrium of leadership in healthy societies is foundational for understanding of his ethical and political thought. I will proceed in 3 steps today. After a short introduction to al-Farabi, which is mostly just a lot of disclaimers, I will discuss his account of virtue as a mean. Then I will draw out how the ideal ruler and the virtuous city are both marked by an emotional equilibrium. And then finally, I will discuss how such an ideal of philosophical and political balance is the basis for judging those individuals or arrangements marked by unbalanced emotions as inferior. So the first thing I thought would be helpful for this group would be to provide just a little bit of background on who we're dealing with. And I mean, you can totally now get offended and angry if I misjudged your knowledge of al-Farabi. So notwithstanding the importance of al-Kindi, who dies in 870, as the first proper Aristotelian philosopher who was writing in Arabic, al-Farabi is generally considered the first major philosopher to take up the challenge of integrating Greek philosophical thought with religious commitments more generally and Islam in particular. While the order and dating of his corpus remains a matter of fervent debate, we are fortunate to have access to about half of his rather large philosophical output, which spans a variety of genres, from classical kind of commentaries to books on music theory, politics, religion, and the like. However, similarly to his corpus and the issues with dating it, reconstructing the life of al-Farabi is very, very challenging due to a complete lack of information. Al-Farabi most likely was born around the year 870. His family appears to have come from Trans-Oxania, or the land beyond the Oxus River, so roughly the area today of Central Asia that includes Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, southern Kyrgyzstan, and southwest Kazakhstan. As Ulrich Rudolph notes, we do not really know much about al-Farabi's life before he came to Baghdad and began to study the Organon with East Syrian Christian monks, most importantly Johanna ibn Haylan. There he also, al-Farabi, learned Arabic and possibly studied philosophy with the East Syrian Christian translator and student of Aristotle, Abu Bishr Mata ibn Yunus, though this claim might also just be a fabrication. Al-Farabi left Baghdad in 942, maybe 43, for Damascus and Aleppo, which again he left for Egypt in 949, and then he eventually returned to Damascus and died there sometime in 950, maybe early 951. So we're in the 10th century. For this paper, I will engage several of his central and original philosophical and political works, so sort of a distinction from the commentaries. Namely, I'll be looking at his Attainment of Happiness and Directing Attention to the Way of Happiness. These are two distinct works. And then his very famous ones, The Political Regime, The Perfect State, The Book of Religion, and his selected aphorisms. As I mentioned, and maybe I'll just say it again here, is the relation of these works to each other is very debated. A lot of them are repetitive but inconsistent. Generally, it's the Perfect State is seen as his magnum opus and his last work, so it kind of gets a lot of authority, but there is really no agreement. And one big issue that we have in Islamic philosophy is that we just have a very unstable textual situation, meaning a lot of the works that we deal with are based on a single manuscript, have been edited once, often poorly. So I think the work of the Islamic philosopher, which I always say to my colleagues in other fields, is sort of when you pull off a lobe off the shelf, we have to stop there. Like, we have no lobe to pull, and we just have to start. Every time we think we found something interesting, we have to actually look, like, is this, maybe just a dot on a manuscript that somebody badly edited. So it's a fun field to be in. I feel like I'm selling it really well to you. But yeah, so just in terms of if there are inconsistencies and confusions, there's real material challenges with this type of work. Okay, wonderful. That was my background introduction. Now, let's get to the meat of it. Virtue as a median, maybe is the proper word here, in al-Farabi. So the Islamic heritage's contribution to a greater revival in virtue ethics has been considered in a variety of ways, as I indicated already in the introduction. Like most traditions, Islam's ethical thought is diverse and complex, spanning many disciplines and genres. Hence, the potential connection between what we consider the Islamic tradition and the manifold issues raised by virtue talk is very much up for scholarly debate. One less favored factor in all these discussions has been Islamic philosophy. As Peter Adamson notes in his contribution to the 2010 Routledge Companion to Ethics, the Islamic philosophical tradition is not particularly known for its contribution to ethics. Though one of the first encounters, in fact, between Greek virtue ideas and the Islamic intellectual tradition does occur in Islamic philosophy, particularly in al-Farabi. Al-Farabi luckily gets off the hook a little bit in this judgment. He stands out, as many have noted, as one of the few major Arab philosophers to have actually taken an interest in the normative parts of the philosophical curriculum. So he's a bit of an outlier in what is generally judged not a fruitful avenue for Islamic virtue thought. We get a comprehensive discussion of al-Farabi's understanding of the nature of virtue in the selected aphorisms. Here we learn that virtues can be of two types, he tells us, moral and rational. As he writes, the rational are the virtues of the rational part of the soul, such as wisdom, intellect, cleverness, quick-wittedness, and excellent understanding. The moral are the virtues of the appetitive part of the soul, such as moderation, courage, liberality, and justice. The moral virtues and vices are the result of repeated action or habit. If those actions are good, a human being attains a virtue, and vice versa. Given that virtues are habits, no one is born with them. Instead, human beings are born with dispositions for certain virtues or vices, which makes attaining them for that person easier. After this general setup, the actual nature of virtue is discussed. Here we read that virtues for al-Farabi are, I'm quoting, traits of the soul, and states intermediate, so mutawassit in the Arabic, between two traits, both of which are vices, one of which is greater and the other lesser, meaning the extremes of excess and deficiency. Al-Farabi then gives several examples, including gentleness or patience, hilm, which is an intermediate between excessive anger and not becoming angry at all. He further explains that this intermediate state of virtues is not absolute, but relational. As he writes, the quantity of actions in number and extent, and their quality and intensity and lassitude ought to be determined only in accordance to the one acting, the one to whom the action is directed, and that for the sake of which the action is being done, in accordance with the time and in accordance with the place. So for example, anger is calibrated according to the conditions for the one at whom one is angry, in accordance with the thing for the sake of which there is anger, and in accordance with the time and place in which it occurs. The potential objection that things that come from the appetitive part of the soul are evil per se, al-Farabi counters directly. Emotions such as jealousy, greed, harshness, and even anger are only a problem when, I'm quoting, used to gain misery. Whereas when they are used to gain happiness, they're not evils. Rather, all of them are goods, end of quote. Emotions themselves are clearly not the issue. In fact, just rashly denying certain things perceived to be problematic in order to appear virtuous is no good at all. For example, giving up a desire for money to later be rewarded with more money for one's previous seemingly virtuous denial of money is not actually virtuous, al-Farabi says. Such actions are closer to vices, he thinks. Giving up something in the hopes of gaining greater reward are actions that are not truly of the nature of virtues, he says, nor close to it, but they are rather of the genus of defects and vile things. There's no true process of achieving an equilibrium here in such attempts, but rather deferring of one's desire for things such as profit or pleasure to a later point. For al-Farabi, there's a clear connection then between the moral and intellectual virtues. Like a sick person who imagines evil things as good things, the one who is virtuous in the moral virtues always has a passion and longing only for goals that are good things in truth. As a result, the prudent person is virtuous in the moral virtues. Such a person verifies the goal by means of the virtue he has and verifies what leads to the goal by means of excellent deliberation. This applies to smart decision making on the small household scale as much as to the larger political arena. There's also a sense in which the happiness of a virtuous life in this world prepares for the benefit one reaps in the next. Thus, al-Farabi argues that death for the virtues is neither feared nor desired. It is simply something to be delayed as long as possible, since death is the end of an opportunity for further improvement and thus further future profit in the afterlife. Death is neither to be sought in such a case nor to be mourned, meaning in the case of a virtuous life. The connection between virtue, happiness, and the possibility of attaining a soul that endures the body's death is in fact clear in most of his works. Thus, in The Perfect State, we read, the more one performs, I'm quoting here, the actions by which felicity is obtained, the better and easier such actions become. As a result, al-Farabi writes, the stronger and more excellent and more perfect becomes the soul whose very purpose is to reach felicity, until it arrives at that stage of perfection in which it can dispense with matter, so that it becomes independent of it, neither perishing when matter does, nor requiring matter in order to survive. End of quote. Such happy souls, in his view, then join other souls of this rank in a state of communal felicity in which each enjoys the enjoyment of others and the groups. To my students, I sometimes describe this as like the faculty meeting in the philosophy department. It's just like a lot of very rational, happy people together. This sort of communion of happy souls is al-Farabi's vision of the afterlife and the goal of one's striving for happiness. So we've reached the end of section 2, and we're getting into section 3, the implications of this account of virtue for the perfect ruler as balanced. Already in his pre-philosophical book, Directing Attention to the Way of Happiness, we see al-Farabi discuss the connection between virtue and the ideal ruler. In short, the ruler is the person who can and should bring about happiness among the people. This ability to guide is the decisive criterion of proper rulership. Al-Farabi is clear that such a person, whether we call them philosopher, legislator, imam, ruler, should be truthful, just, and virtuous in themselves. However, unlike a false philosopher, the true ruler has the capacity to guide other people to their happiness, whether he gets the chance or not. And al-Farabi compares this importantly to a doctor who's always a doctor because he has the capacity to heal whether or not he actually exercises it. Similarly, in the selected aphorisms, the person making the proper judgments about calibration of the virtues is the governor and king, and the art by which he does so is the political art and the kingly craft. The ideal king or ruler is not powerful or wealthy, but he's the one who is A, virtuous in himself, and B, guides people to their happiness. On the basis of both A and B, such a person is the most perfect, most virtuous person. This is what he calls then the king in truth. We get a little more information on this ideal ruler and their relationship with virtue in al-Farabi's magnum opus and most likely last work, as I mentioned, On the Perfect State. Here al-Farabi affirms what we've already learned, that the ideal ruler is the most complete and perfect human being. Like the first cause in the universe, or the heart in the body, the first ruler is the highest leader of the excellent city. He cannot be ruled by anything, al-Farabi writes, and he orders all affairs in the city towards their proper end. To become such an excellent ruler, one must be both properly disposed towards rulership and properly habituated in one's will for rulership. This person then for al-Farabi is fully free, meaning they are the one over whom nobody has any sovereignty whatsoever, and they're contrasted, of course, with people who are enslaved. As al-Farabi writes, he is a man who has reached his perfection and has become actually intellect and actually being thought, his representative faculty having by nature reached its utmost perfection. This faculty of his is predisposed by nature to receive, either in waking life or in sleep, from the active intellect, the particulars, either as they are or by imitating them, and also the intelligibles by imitating them. The perfect ruler for him thus has reached the stage of what he calls the acquired intellect, the stage between a passive intellect and the active intellect. As a result, the perfect ruler receives what he calls revelation from God through the mediation of the active intellect, so that the emanation from God Almighty to the active intellect is passed on to the passive intellect through mediation of the acquired intellect. This person, al-Farabi reiterates, holds the most perfect rank of humanity and has reached the highest degree of human felicity. His soul, in fact, maybe, he's not consistent on this, has united with the active intellect. As a result, he knows every action by which felicity can be reached, which is the first condition for being a ruler. Al-Farabi then tells us what makes a ruler in addition to knowing how to reach happiness. He gives us a list of requirements. They're a good orator, they lead people towards the actions that lead to happiness, and they should be physically fit for warfare. Such a person is the sovereign over whom no other being has any sovereignty whatsoever, something we've already heard. He's the imam, the first sovereign of the excellent city, the sovereign of the nation, the sovereign of the universal state. End of quote. However, to help reach such a state, a human being in the first place must be marked by 12 qualities at birth. A strong body that can accomplish actions, good understanding or comprehension, good memory, generally being bright, good at speaking, having a love for learning, being truthful, moderate in the passions such as sex, food, gambling, honorable and proud, not interested in money, loving of justice, steadfast or unwavering in his goals. Al-Farabi does acknowledge that given this list of requirements, it's hard to find one person to fulfill these criteria. And there might be ways several people can fulfill this role. However, what is clear is that the one most suited to ruling ideally is the most balanced and the one most able to bring balance in other people. The ruler is in fact like the heart, he loves making that comparison, most perfect and in charge of bringing about order in the body. This idea of not being the most perfect but also being able to affect change is clarified again in his selective aphorisms. Here al-Farabi states that the ruler is like a physician that creates the proper equilibrium in the body of the city. The one who determines the right dosage with respect to nutrition and medication is the physician, but the one who infers what is intermediate and equilibrated with respect to moral habits and actions is the governor of the cities and the king. And the way by which he does that is the political art and the kingly craft. The healthy medium is the central image of a virtuous human being for him, which is perfected in a ruler who is above all measured and prudent, and as such can bring about the measured association of human beings. In fact, the selective aphorisms as a work are set up as a mediation on this analogy between a healthy soul and a healthy body, and a healthy people and a healthy body politic. As in a healthy body, the goal of a healthy soul is moderation or evenness, itidal in Arabic. Thus we read, Just as the health of the body is an equilibrium of its temperament and its sickness is a deviation from equilibrium, so too are the health of the city and its uprightness and an equilibrium of the moral habits of its inhabitants, and its sickness a disparity found in their moral habits. While a body in disparity is healed by the physician, it is the statesman who brings a city back to equilibrium. However, unlike the physician who merely creates bodily strength that can be used towards ill or good, the ruler directs the souls towards the good. He is the superior actor, and his craft, politics, is the superior craft. And interestingly, in one of the works, he has a quite lengthy meditation on the fact that for him, essentially, rulership is a moral species. But he only does that, unfortunately, in one work. In the political regime, al-Farabi makes clear that the first ruler without qualification is the one who does not need, not in anything at all, to be ruled by another human being. Such person is not only ruled by no one, they also have the ability to determine and define and direct others towards rule. Such a person has his soul joined then with the active intellect, as we said, and acquired the acquired intellect. Now, as we already read previously, it is via the active intellect and through the acquisition of the acquired intellect that such a ruler receives revelation from the first cause. The people that are then ruled by this king are virtuous, good, and happy people. And if they are more than one and in one place, they become a virtuous nation in a virtuous city. The virtuous people, through their own or the ruler's guidance, perform good actions, which makes their soul acquire good traits. And then through this process, starting with the ruler down to the people, they attain their happiness in accordance with their level of actions. Eventually, the people, ideally, are able to dispense with material conditions and be free from them. And so when their bodies perish, their souls do not. They join the souls of others before them. What is important is that al-Farabi also discusses the inverse. Those of vile, sick souls continuously engage in vile actions. Their souls then remain material and do not come to perfection such that they are separated from material. As a result, when their bodies pass away, their souls do so as well. However, as he makes clear in the attainment of happiness, a true philosopher and perfect ruler is only the one who uses his knowledge for the benefits of others, meaning their education. If one just knows things, as I already mentioned, is a defective form of philosophy. In fact, the greater one's power for making such matters intelligible, meaning knowledge to attain happiness, as well as for bringing them into actual existence, the more perfect one's philosophy is. The perfect ruler and the perfect philosopher thus combine for him. They are perfect because of their ability to bring about change in other people. Now, most importantly in this work, this is the attainment of happiness, al-Farabi then brings in the relationship between philosophy and religion. For when discussing the proper preparation of someone who will become a true philosopher, meaning the one who not only knows things but also brings about change, he adds to the list from the perfect state. In addition to good comprehension, memory, love for justice, and proper relation to desires, he now adds that he should have sound conviction about opinions of the religion in which he's reared, hold fast to the virtuous acts in his religion, and not forsake all or most of them. In this context, al-Farabi then does discuss his famous distinction between understanding things as they are, philosophy, and learning about happiness and the like through representation, religion. The faithful masses do the latter, since their intellects are not able to properly form a concept of things, but rather need representation of truths through religion. Here, as in his book on religion, it is clear that religion is a symbolic representation that is inferior to philosophy and can differ and be better or worse in quality. The virtuous religion is the one which guides people through its opinions and actions to actual happiness. However, while virtuous religion is similar to philosophy in the ways in which it directs towards happiness, it is also clearly subordinate, he says, because it derives from its demonstrative truth, meaning philosophies. Now, given that most people's intellectual capacities are quite limited, religion is the most useful tool to establish proper ideas in their souls, and thus also to bring about social harmony and ordering for most people. Okay, wonderful. In The Perfect State, al-Farabi dedicates an entire chapter to this question of the relation of philosophy and religion, or knowledge through demonstration and symbols, respectively. Here he makes clear that in demonstrative knowledge, there is no room for disagreement, as things are represented as they are, whereas in religious symbols, we see room for disagreement, since things are known through symbols. The knowledge in question, which are things all the people of the excellent city ought to know, are also described by al-Farabi here. They include the first cause and its qualities, all the parts of the universe, the nature of man, the excellent ruler, and the excellent city, also known as all the contents of his books. Here it seems people can in fact leave behind, in this book, meaning The Perfect State, it does seem that some people can in fact leave behind the symbolic representations and eventually graduate to the realm of philosophy through education. At that point, people might be made aware of the problems in their symbolic representations or religions, but it's a quite unique position for him to take. As he writes, among those who follow religion, there might be some who put their finger on the grounds for objection to those symbols and hold that they are inadequate and false. Such a person eventually can acquire philosophical wisdom. Overall, we can then observe a ripple chain of balance. At least I've been trying to describe it. For Farabi, virtue itself is a balance. The virtuous soul is balanced. The virtuous city is balanced. As he writes, the virtuous city resembles the perfect and healthy body, all of whose limbs cooperate to make the life of the animal perfect and to preserve it in this state. End of quote. So the city that is virtuous for him is marked by cooperating and moving closer towards perfection, which is ideally directed by a ruler who's not only balanced himself, but ensures balance in the city and in each of its inhabitants. Al-Farabi's account of virtue, a healthy soul, perfect rulership, and the virtuous city is thus one of balance. This leads me then to my last section on al-Farabi's account of failing cities as unbalanced, particularly, it seems, emotionally. So last section, the danger of unbridled emotions. As we've seen so far, al-Farabi's account of virtue as a balance and its connected conception of proper emotional control is crucial for his vision of the ideal ruler as virtuous, as a virtuous, balanced philosopher king who brings about the virtuous city. In this final section, I want to draw attention to the implications of this account when it comes to the inverse of his proposal, and that is the rule of unbridled emotions. I see echoes here of Yeltsin's account of his Islamic philosophy on emotion, meaning that a discussion of emotions and the ruler's particular prerogative in them does seem to be crucial for representing and maintaining an image of a ruler capable of managing an empire. The just ruler as the most emotionally balanced can thus be seen as part of a process that defines identities and roles with the help of emotions, whereby these definitions, along with the relevant emotional types, shape and perpetuate ideologies and power structures. Considering this, it should come as no surprise that uncontrolled emotions of anger and desire are what mark the leadership of those who seize control in what al-Farabi describes as the ignorant cities. That is, those cities that do not know true happiness, and hence also do not direct their actions and the actions of their inhabitants towards it. Instead, they focus on superficial things such as health, wealth, pleasure, or freedom. As he writes, in the political regimes, the ones in charge in the ignorant cities have given control from their rational faculties to their desires or emotions. People here, he says, put their irascible faculties and actions as instruments for arriving at the desire, thereby putting their higher and loftier faculties in the service of what is more vile. That is, they put their irrational faculty in the service of the irascible and desiring faculties, and then their irascible faculties in the service of their desiring faculties. One outgrowth of such an unbridled situation of emotions is that, one outgrowth of such an unbridled emotion is that reason is being moved from its guiding function to something subordinate in the service of desire, so it's a form of domination. The souls of people become subservient to their desires, al-Farabi writes, and such people then devote their deliberation to inferring what makes the actions of anger and desire complete. As a result, people are marked by a love of domination and great gluttony and end up giving great importance to women. They seek to be pleasing to women and hope to magnify their standing among women. As a result, women are in authority over many of them and are responsible for the affairs of the household, he says. Giving fully into or perfecting desires and anger for al-Farabi is connected to gluttony of food and sexual desires, as well as domination. As a consequence of this leadership, the cities themselves are also marked by emotional imbalances and the pursuit of things that are not true happiness. The sense is very much here that the relation between emotions and virtues is a double-edged sword. They need to be properly managed rather than suppressed or unleashed. There's then both great power and great peril in our emotions. The issue with the potential of properly managed emotions and the danger of unbridled emotions is clarified particularly in al-Farabi's assessment of the democratic city. Here people are free to do whatever they like, he says, and no one is superior to anyone. In fact, there is no ruler and no one ruled. This city, then, he writes, is like an embroidered garment, replete with colorful figures and dyes, and people love it. For every human being who has a passion or desire for anything is able to gain it in this city. This state of diversity and freedom is also one in which people do not restrain their passions in the least. The problem with the democratic city, then, is one of unbridled freedom of emotions, which precludes the true happiness of the individual and the proper functioning of society at every level. However, very interestingly, given how varied things are in this city, it is possible for virtuous rulers, and thus a virtuous city, to emerge from it. The democratic city for al-Farabi is then both the most good and the most evil of the non-ideal cities. Al-Farabi judges it most good of the non-virtuous cities because properly virtuous people could emerge from the chaos. At the same time, he considers it as most evil because it is truly a full chaos. Everything and anything exists in the city, and there's no orderly ruler, vision for good, actions, or greater orientations towards happiness. In fact, there's no orientation at all. In the democratic city for al-Farabi, the virtuous ruler is the one who's excellent at deliberating and fit at using stratagems to gain the inhabitants their different and variegated desires and passions. It seems clear that, generally speaking, the souls of those who are ignorant in this city perish along with their bodies because all they have known are desires and passions. For now, I will be concluding. At the beginning of this talk, I mentioned a recent interest in psychology and philosophy in the broader study of religious ethics. In an effort to connect with pre-modern wisdom on ethics and politics, many have thought to revive their stance on emotions. Molly Farnes recently noted the following about the role of emotions in the study of ethics. While some characterize anger and other vehement passions as irrational emotional states that need to be contained and corrected by dispassionate reason, many others have argued for the importance of the passion in ethical and political life. End of quote. In line with what we've seen as Aristotle's conception of anger as a passionate response to injustice, anger then is being reconsidered, as Farnes states, as a virtuous response to wrongdoing and a spur to political action to address it. The salience of such arguments from the classical tradition to contemporary protests and social movements is obvious. However, I also think al-Farabi in particular cautions us that we cannot simply envisage a recovery of pre-modern emotion talk. As Van den Bossche has noted recently, discourses on passions, desires, and emotions have changed considerably through the centuries. From impediments of virtue to their own discrete realm, the relationship of morality is not far away. For al-Farabi, as I've hoped to have shown, the emotions are an intricate part of the ruler's virtuous development and thus his ability to rule himself in his political realm. Without proper emotional control, there is no virtuous flourishing, not for himself and neither for the city and its inhabitants. Thinking about the gap between Farnes' contemporary work and Aristotle, I hope to have shown that our second teacher, al-Farabi, is very measured and careful in his engagement with the passions, especially potent ones like anger. He neither vilifies nor celebrates them. As we saw, he views proper emotional balance as both a crucial prerequisite and end of politics. While we might think the ruler, like the first cause, is just simply perfect and unmoved, he turns out to be rather balanced in perfect, knowing, controlled emotions. The issue is not the presence of emotions, even of those we might be tempted to view negatively. Rather, al-Farabi's concern is with their management. Emotions for him have a proper place in the soul and the city. If they're balanced right, they're what makes the perfect ruler and the perfect city perfect, that is virtuous. The proper balancing of emotions is basic to the proper attainment of virtues and thus to achieving happiness in this life. Eventually, it is the virtuous who can hope for more perfection in an afterlife that is open only to those who have managed their moral and intellectual development in this one. The implications of such a celebration of the middle is clear for those individuals and groups that do not possess it. Controlling emotions and balancing them right in themselves, others, and thus the human community is the task of politics, as al-Farabi states. And those who fail to do so suffer the consequences in this life and this life alone. Thank you.